Hi, if you're new here, my name is Megumi. I was born and raised in Okinawa, Japan. When I was 20, I studied abroad in South Korea for about a year. And that's when my passion for language learning really began. Currently, I'm working on my fourth language, German. As you can see, I can speak English. So today I would like to share how I picked up British English even without studying abroad. I'll be covering 3 main points: why I chose British English, the methods I used, and the challenges I faced. And at the end, I'll answer a fun question: if I could go back in time, would I still choose British English? As always, I put timestamps down below, so feel free to skip around the video if you feel like it. Let's get started. Firstly, I'll explain how I learned British English and how. Okay, let me explain my English journey. This is my history graph. When I was 20 and studying in Korea, my English, let's be honest, terrible. Here, there's actually a video I posted on the Instagram story where I was asking a Russian friend.
Speak. 아닌데? 내가가 뭐야? 얘 그냥?
내가 하는 English. My English.
I said, how do you say my English in English? Let's make it clear. In Japan, we usually start learning listening and speaking around grade 3 or 4, doing lots of fun games with native speakers. Then by grades 5 and 6, we are learning all 4 skills: listening, speaking, reading and writing. But it's been said like this. I'm not sure about that time of listening and speaking really had it properly. By the time we've finished middle and high school, that's like a solid decade of English exposure. Yet, at 20, I couldn't say a thing. I couldn't understand much either. There are tons of people who can't speak English well, even after all those years. That's because our school system focuses on memorizing facts than actually communicating. I wasn't even interested in English. I studied it only to pass the test. Once I jumped into studying Korean, English completely disappeared from my mind. I mean, I couldn't even recall it when I heard it again at 20. That's because English felt like a code. Spell it right, write on the paper, and get the good score. I never saw it as a tool for chatting. It was just a brain training puzzle. So what turned me around, it ended up being the amazing people I met in South Korea. When I started studying Korean in Seoul, I met people from around the globe. Speaking Korean, I made wonderful friends, and through them I realized that English could help me meet even more people and see the world differently. That lit a spark. As soon as I got back to Japan, I jumped back into studying English. I bought TOEIC books from bookshops and I cried one time at how tough they are. So instead, I spent my days watching YouTube and Netflix with English subtitles and Japanese ones too, when both available, and no more textbooks. For about 3 months, I did this for around 4 hours every day. Little by little, I started to get the hang of the SVO sentence structure, and I recognized a few words here and there. Next up, I transferred into university and chose English communication as my major. In my first year, we did basic grammar and reading, but we spoke every day in class, which is amazing. When I wasn't in class, I kept watching YouTube and Netflix, especially with dual subtitles, 1 hour every day for a whole year. I didn't obsess over grammar or reading, especially because I didn't want to stress myself out from those. I found it more helpful to just go with the flow. And things got interesting. I started taking a class learning IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, and I also really ramped up my grammar studies. But the game changer was I partly started mimicking and shadowing British English. I tried mimicking and shadowing British accents using a content I loved. About 6 months straight. It all began when my friend from Singapore, she said, "You have a little bit British accent and it suits you well." That stuck with me, and I decided to dive deep into British English, films, YouTube and everything. I adored how my British teacher sounded, and especially Emma Watson's accent also. I was absolutely falling in love with them, so I found speakers I loved, made sure I understood every word and shadowed them every day for about 2 hours. And within the first month, a polyglot teacher from the US, he noticed my accent shift. That was a great feeling, to be honest. I also watched English with Lucy every morning for a month to master her vowel explanations. Plus, I added about 90 minutes of grammar review daily. And I also even started more complex vocabulary for exams. It was around 2 hours total per day. And of course, I still had the daily English speaking practice in class. But I would say learning vocabulary list is not a fun time for me. Okay, next, at this stage, I really started to balance input and output. Every day I did shadowing as usual, and I also took English literature and English history classes. Because British English fascinated me, I also had English discussions with friends 3 times a week and watched news in English. That phase lasted about 6 months, and it was both fun and intense. Finally, I wanted to really experience English. So I went solo trip to England. For 7 days, I went to London, Liverpool and Oxford, Bristol. And later that, spent about 5 days in Australia. I'll never forget the thrill of hearing all those diverse accents and languages. It was so amazing. What really helped me master British English? Number 1, mimicking and shadowing, hands down the most effective. Number 2, loving the accent, the motivational was real. Number 3, having a British teacher to share my progress with, accountability matters. From language learners online, for instance on Reddit, many say things like mimicking is the number 1 thing you can't do to improve your speaking ability. Majorly, it builds muscle memory for actually forming sentences. That really resonated my personal experience. It's all about training your brain and mouth to move in sync. And when you love the contents you're mimicking, practicing doesn't feel like a chore. It becomes fun. Alright, so even though I was super motivated and genuinely wanted to learn British English, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were definitely some challenges along the way, and I think it's really helpful to be aware of them before you start learning. So today I would like to share 2 of the biggest difficulties I personally faced when I started learning British English. The first one is the crazy variety of accents. When people say British English, it sounds like one thing, but actually it's incredibly broad. Every accent feels difficult in its own way. What makes it tricky is that depending on where they're from, the pronunciation, intonation, even rhythm of the speech can be totally different. As you might know, the UK is made up of 4 countries and each of them has its own very distinct accents. Even just within England, there's so many regional accents. When I was at university, there were around 5 British professors and every single one of them had a different accent. It was the same with YouTube videos and the TV shows. Everyone sounded different and I really struggled at first to figure out which accent to actually follow. It was even hard to tell the differences. So in the end, I stopped trying to stick to just one accent. So instead, I focused on shadowing the voices that I really liked. Looking back, most of them are people who spoke with an RP accent, and a few of my university professors also had an RP. That probably influenced me quite a bit. The second challenge was the lack of content and resources. In Japan, most of our English education is based on American English. Textbooks, classes, teachers, even the films we watch. So naturally, British English content was pretty limited, especially things like with Japanese subtitles. And to be honest, having limited content made it hard to stay motivated. That's why I ended up watching the Harry Potter films over and over again. And I must have watched nearly every speech and interview Emma Watson has ever done. So those were the two biggest challenges I faced while learning British English. I think the accent variety is something everyone should be aware of. When we think of British English, we often picture the Queen's English or BBC English. But in reality, there's so many accents that sound completely different, but still they're all classed as British English. Some of my professors from Wales and Northern Ireland, but honestly I couldn't tell where they're from just by listening. That's when I realized to truly learn an accent, understanding the culture and history behind it is absolutely essential. It shows respect to people who speak the language, and it also helps you to connect more deeply with how and why they speak the way they do. So would I still choose to learn British English? To be completely honest, I'm not sure. If I hadn't met my British teachers at university, I probably wouldn't have tried. I think I would have just followed what most people around me were doing, learning American English. Where I'm from, Okinawa, we actually have 70% of all the US military bases in Japan. Because of that, there's quite a large American military living here. In the central part of Okinawa, there's an even place called American Village, where not just locals, but loads of Americans hang out. I think half of the people are American. I used to go there with my friends quite a bit. We had meetups with American friends to practice Japanese and English together. So as you can imagine, British accented English really stands out there. Every time I spoke English, people would say things like, "Oh my gosh, you have a British accent." They were always so surprised in a good way. And those reactions really helped me realize, oh, my English is improving, or I'm actually making progress. It gave me so much encouragement. The point I want to make is keep doing what keeps you motivated. If you start off learning British English and later you think, oh, I actually want to switch to American English, or Australian English suits me better, that's completely fine. The most important thing is to follow what you enjoy and just go with it. So let's keep going together on this language learning journey. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Today I shared my own English learning journey with you, and I would love to hear about your journey too. Have you ever used the same method I talked about, or did something else work really well for you? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching again. I also have a Japanese podcast and Korean channel. So if you're interested, please check them out. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye!